Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the third in Education for Employment's Power Lunch series, 25-minute conversations about the global issue of women's economic inclusion. At Education for Employment, we are deeply invested in this cause. We have supported nearly 70,000 young women to skill up and enter the world of work in the Middle East and North Africa, where fewer women work in the formal labor market than anywhere else. Today, I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Anita Knotts, Senior Vice President for Calamos Wealth Management, who oversees the Midwest Sales Region, Marketing, Wealth Planning, and Operations divisions. Anita is also a leader in diversity and inclusion, recognized by Investment News with a See It, Be It Role Model Award. In fact, Anita, I think we met at that luncheon when you received the award about a year ago in New York.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
And I loved your speech that day. It was amazing.
Thank you.
And everyone, Anita is passionate about recruiting and promoting more women in finance and investing. Within Calamos, Anita formed the Women's Initiative Network as a platform for women to meet and discuss topics relevant to professional development and work-life balance. We can all use more of that, especially right now. And I'd like to invite all participants to ask questions in the Q&A as we go along. And please do that during the conversation. We have a great range of C-suite executives, educators, nonprofit, government, and university representatives, as well as young people, students from around the world. And we'd love to hear from you. So please go ahead and ask your questions as we go along. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you so much. Honored to be here.
It's great to have you with us for some sort of behind the scenes advice from a leader in investment advisory services. And you've been a leader in this space for over 25 years. What is your secret to thriving and not just surviving in financial services?
Well, Jasmine, first of all, I'm tickled to be here. You know, based on what you know about me for the past 12 months, that these are the types of forums that make me jump out of my bed. So I've been looking forward to this. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. In terms of working in this industry, male-dominated industry, as we all know, and the secret to thriving versus surviving, in my mind, I'm going to start with the cliche, right? Finding work that is fulfilling for you. Find the work that you enjoy doing. I use this phrase a lot, jumping out of bed, because that's kind of, you know, these days it's trying to tap into your why. What is it that motivates you? Find that type of work and you will thrive. The thought is that if you're doing what you enjoy doing, you tend to do well. And if you tend to do well, then you tend to be financially successful. That said, one of the other things that I've learned, and I'd love to say I was like this from the beginning, but it's probably more in the latter half of my career. Don't get too comfortable. You know, don't get too comfortable. When you're too comfortable, you stop growing. You start to stagnate. By sheer coincidence, actually, yesterday on LinkedIn, I saw something: growth and comfort cannot coexist, which is just brilliant. Always try to be pushing to do something that is outside of your comfort zone, even if it's terrifying. And I feel like in the latter half of my career, as I've reached out to try to find those things, you know, I keep telling myself, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? If it doesn't kill you, you're only going to grow from it. So as you move through your career, trying different routes that may not be traditional to who you are, and you come out on the other end, you really cannot put a dollar price on how valuable that is for your career. And I would especially say this to women: take those calculated risks. Take them all the time, take them every chance you get. Be open to things that are thrown at you, and don't immediately count yourself out. And as soon as I figured that out, pretty much my career has held a different meaning for me, I would say. And I would say that's when you truly start to thrive.
That's so insightful, Anita. And just for the younger people on the line who are maybe starting out their careers, does that mean changing jobs and changing employers, or does that also mean finding rooms for growth within your, you know, where you're working?
Well, I think it can be both. I know that right now, you know, when I'm looking at resumes for interns or younger folks coming into the industry, you look at the resume, there's a lot of job hopping, as we say. And initially, for those of us who've been in the workforce for a while, we look at that and we say, oh my gosh, is there no loyalty? What is going on here? But that that's sort of how they roll these days, right? It doesn't mean that they're not loyal, but they are very quick to look at what it is that is fulfilling for them. And if they don't find it, they're going to move. So there's nothing wrong with that, switching jobs. But I also think that if you're at a company where the philosophy is aligned with yours, the value system is aligned with yours, stay there and try to find ways to add value to that organization. Be proactive, offer suggestions, make yourself indispensable, and the path can evolve in that manner.
That's great advice. And when you think back to the start of your own career, what was it like entering the financial services world as a woman? And did you face any pushback? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Oh boy, yeah, yes. The answer is yes. So not only as a woman in a male-dominated industry, but as a woman of color, right? So I'm an Indian immigrant, so just for your audience, moved here to the United States when I was 4 years old from India. And when I got off of the plane, of course, I knew not a lick of English. So sitting in a classroom when you're in kindergarten, not knowing what's really being spoken to you, I look at it as starting off with that experience and not feeling like I had a voice. And I always use my motto as being a voice for the voiceless now, right? Marginalized demographics who need others to speak up for them. And that gives me a sense of purpose. So when I started off in this industry, whatever it is now, 28 years ago, it's not as if I set out with some specific mission in mind. I would not be genuine if I said that. But as my career evolved, what I found was, yes, it's male dominated, but honestly, if you put your head down, do the work. And a big thing that I noticed is showing curiosity, right? Showing curiosity. And back in those days, there weren't really formal structures to find mentors or sponsors as there are now. But back then, what I did was finding the advisors, the investment advisors, the traders, the portfolio management people who were really good at their craft and who I could learn from. Yes, most of them were men, but I went to them and I said, listen, can you teach me this? Can you teach me that? Did I have to deal with a lot of sarcasm, a lot of, laughing at me, making fun of me? Absolutely. It was unfortunate. It's interesting, this question, because when you look at the environment now with all the hashtag movements, right? Me Too, Time's Up. It's hard for people to hear me talk probably and say, what, you put up with that? But think about it, close to 30 years ago, there wasn't this level of awareness then. So I think myself, like many other women at the time, we just kind of went along with it, not happy about it, but we just said, hey, we probably don't have a choice. They've been allowed to get away with this for a long time, and we just have to work hard, right? So I think that finding mentors for myself was a big key. Eventually, I did end up working for a female advisor who really made a big difference for me. That's when the wheels started turning for me, because when I thought, if we could have more of her in this industry and attract more women into the industry, push more women into leadership, so much of the dynamic that we're seeing now could change. So while it was unfortunate that I went through that, I don't personally look at it as, oh, woe is me. I feel like everything that's happened to me brought me to the very moment that I'm in now. I went through those experiences so that now I can start to implement change so that other women don't have to.
It's extraordinary. And I think that's what makes you so empathetic and such a strong leader is the journey that you've gone on. You talk about mentoring, and that's something that at Education for Employment, we really believe in and are doing as well, is really helping young people who have never had a job break into the world of work and have mentors along the way. I want to ask you, this incredible journey you've had. We're going to have to fast forward from when you were 4 years old and came to America. I can't even imagine what those first few years were like in high school and all of that. But fast forward, somehow you reached the top of the wealth management and investment world. And then did you find the attitude towards you being a woman in the industry change as you started to become a leader in the industry?
Unfortunately, not much. And I'll start by saying this. I actually felt that when I started off in the industry, it felt more like a meritocracy. And I'll explain what I mean. You put your head down, you do the work. It's kind of like a classroom. You study hard, you get the good grades, and you move to the next rank, right? And when I first started out, yeah, it kind of felt that way. Just ignore some of the noise, just do the work, show the curiosity, as I mentioned, and you'll do well. What I've noticed, and a lot of studies have been put out that confirm this, once women reach that mid-level and they're trying to get past that, right? The middle stages, that's when the problem starts, not just in investment management, not just in financial services in general, but just in corporate America or globally, I would say. We need to build in more mechanisms, formal and informal support networks to move women through the ranks. It's not enough to just hire them and bring them into the field. What are you doing once you hire them? Are there support structure networks? Are you creating a talent pipeline? Are there programs, professional development programs that could train them to go from here to here? I think I could have benefited from that. What ended up happening for me was that I ended up finding my own way. So it's doable. I'm not saying that it's an insurmountable situation, because that's what I had to do. But gosh, does it really have to be that difficult? You know, how many women do you think probably step out of the workforce because they don't have that level of energy? They're just tired of fighting, right? So the problem is not, and of course we can always do better and improve on bringing women into the field. But I also feel like we have to pay heightened level of interest in moving women through the ranks. Are we training them to sit in roles where they're in charge of P&Ls, for example, and budgets, revenue generating roles that essentially put them on that track towards the C-suite? And I just don't think we're doing a good job with that. So that's where we need to see more change.
I agree. I think that's a global issue. So one of the issues that we see at Education for Employment that young women that we support mention is how challenging it can be once they finally break into the world of work, which is very difficult to do in the Middle East for women. Yeah. Then how do they advocate for themselves? How do they ask for a raise or a promotion? And how do they get the courage to do that and to advocate for themselves? Do you have any advice?
You know, the one thing I always tell myself is, listen, if I don't advocate for myself, who's going to, right? Let's just start with that fundamental premise. Who cares about my professional and financial livelihood more than I do? And that's not to say that companies have any malicious intent, but have you ever heard of a boss going to their direct report saying, you look like you deserve 30% raise. I'm going to give it to you. You know, I don't think that happens too often in the corporate world. So it's up to us, each of us. And of course, again, you talk about women, this is where we are not as adept in advocating for ourselves. We're fantastic when it comes to advocating for our people. If we're managing a team of folks, we're great at getting them the raise, getting them a promotion. But then when it comes to speaking about ourselves and our own accomplishments, we have to get comfortable with that notion. I have talked to senior level women who still struggle with that. It's interesting. And I would be lying if I said I didn't either, right?
And why is that, Anita? Why?
I think much of that is traditional norms, right? Because we are thought of as women are the nurturers, right? We take care of others. We put ourselves last. It's sort of, and I do feel that that's changing. I think with the next generation, we were just talking as we were prepping for this this call, the next gen gives me a lot of hope. A lot of young women I meet, my daughter included, they are pretty open to saying, look, here's where I really do well. And here's where I deserve to receive accolades for it. So I think that it starts with people at our level, making sure that the generation behind us feels comfortable speaking about themselves. But I'll say this, and I don't know if this is a question coming up, but the other way to change this, Jasmine, is to get more women into positions of leadership. Because what happens then, women in leadership, they already know what it took to get to that level. So they're going to make sure the best female leaders are the best, because they're also doing their part to raise up the women behind them. They're putting in that good word. They're speaking about those other women and their accomplishments when those women are not in the room. They are acting as mentors and sponsors, and we need more of that. So it's not going to change overnight.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think the concept of what are people saying about, you know, the young women in the organization as they're coming up through the ranks when they're not in the room is critical, as you said. I want to go back to one of your first responses because we have a question coming in from Europe, which relates to your comment about, growing and stretching and getting outside your comfort zone. The question is, how do you measure the risk when you're stepping into a new challenge?
Well, I was joking earlier, anything short of death is a risk worth taking, but I'm sure they want a little bit more specific response. I don't want to be overly analytical about this and say do a cost benefit ratio or anything, but truly look, I kind of go through in my mind, if not on a piece of paper, what can I gain from this and what is the worst thing that can happen? When I was 29, I had just gotten married. I got my graduate degree. I got an MBA in finance. And I thought it was before we had kids. And my husband and I just said, look, it's a lifelong dream of ours to kind of move to California. It was a huge risk. We had no job potentials there. We hadn't really interviewed or anything. You know what we did? We quit our jobs, loaded up a U-Haul and drove to the West Coast from Chicago. That was a tremendous risk. Most people would say, well, at least, especially in the finance world, right? You would think I'd be a little bit more prudent financially. But I thought, no, why not? Why not take the risk? It's the United States of America. It's pretty easy to find a job. If you have the will, there's a way, right? So we drove there, lived there for 3 years, absolutely found gainful employment when we were ready. And I say that because I want to make sure everybody knows we did it on our terms. We didn't go there, suddenly go into a panic and get a job. We just kind of enjoyed ourselves for a while. When the time was right, found employment. I went to work for a large bank there, and my husband worked in Silicon Valley. When the time was right, guess what we did? We had our first child, loaded up the U-Haul, and drove right back to Chicago. So that experience, though, when we came out of that and we came out successful, and I would be lying if I didn't say I was very nervous on certain days, I was. But it's meeting that fear. It's meeting that nervousness, doing it anyway, right? And I did that with myself and with my husband. What is the worst thing that can happen? We don't find employment there? Well, that's highly unlikely, right? We have the skill set. We know what our worth is. We know what our value is. And we're going to work in San Francisco. So doing that type of pro-con type of an analysis and do it for yourself, not for your family, not for your parents. Growing up as an Indian, I think if there's any Indian people on this call, they can relate. You do a lot for your parents, right? Or are they going to approve this? Or are they not going to approve? Do it for yourself. And if you can truly see that the best case scenario is that you're going to grow from this, even if it means failure, you grow, I would say just go ahead and do it.
Fantastic. And you talk about, positive job prospects at a time and place in history. Now, today, what we're seeing with the pandemic, of course, are these massive job losses and the disproportionate impact that it's having on youth and on women for a number of reasons. In the Middle East, because the sectors that are hardest hit are sectors where women traditionally have been working: retail, hospitality, informal sector. And everywhere in the world, as millions of children are staying home from school, it's mainly the women, mothers, who are staying home and helping and taking care of them. So can you tell me a little bit about wealth management and women in wealth management, and what is happening in terms of women leaving the workforce during the pandemic?
You know what? This pandemic, I think one of the greatest tragedies, the side effect tragedies, is the impact on women and women leaving the workforce. I think I had read that in September, something like 900,000 women left the workforce just in this country alone, not to mention the rest of the globe. It's horrible. And when you think about the fact that, we have made progress, but what I'm reading now is that it's going to take years, never mind the vaccine and never mind coming out of just the healthcare crisis that we're in, but the impact to women and getting back to where we were, it's going to take multiple years. So we've got women leaving, but then there's another study that's come out, and I think Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook was talking about it. 1 in every 4 senior women is now leaving the workforce. So that's going to take a tremendous toll, because to my comment a few minutes ago, when you have women, senior women at the top who are in charge, they're in leadership, They're in roles where they can control recruiting. If those are the women that are leaving, what does that mean for the culture of the firm? What does that mean for flexible work policies? What does that mean for gender pay gap? Things of that nature, right? So because these women have reached the top while fighting so many biases along the way, they sitting at the top can make a positive impact. If those are the people that are leaving the workforce and leaving industries like wealth management, that's going to have an impact for years to come. Now, I'm going to add something else. Think about the fact also that this whole concept, Jasmine, of the great wealth transfer, right? So by the end of this decade, women are set to will control 30 trillion in private wealth. Where are the women that are going to be helping these women with managing that money? And the great wealth transfer is because baby boomers are going to be leaving this planet. Unfortunately, the rate of divorce is very high, and the rate of gray divorce, right? Women who are 50 and over getting divorced at a higher rate. And of course, women tend to live longer than men. So all of those reasons combined, we need women in this industry to make sure that the women coming into all of this wealth have somebody relatable to talk to about preserving those assets. So if we don't get our ducks in a row, this could be a pretty big issue. And it's one of the things that I advocate the most, bringing women into the industry and really, really creating an industry that's open to the discussion around how do we retain them? How do we keep them?
Yeah, retention is such a big issue as well. Where we work in the Middle East and North Africa, as you talked about, it's breaking into the world of work, it's working your way up, and then it's staying, especially as you start to have families. And as you know, we started our Work for Women campaign here in the US to really galvanize support for women entering the workplace, especially during the pandemic. We're reskilling and we're finding new job openings for women in the Middle East and North Africa. Can you share why you decided to partner with EFE around the campaign, and why should a global audience care about women's economic empowerment in the Middle East and North Africa?
Absolutely. You know, I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that what one nation does absolutely impacts the rest of the world. We're all interconnected. I also feel that the most powerful, let's just call it civilizations, even beyond countries, historically have been those that have treated their women well. And we're seeing that nowadays as well. We've got people like Melinda Gates flying to all corners of the world, making sure that all women have access to things like education and healthcare. And you know what? I'm going to say it. I think we have to do a better job giving women that level of access to economic prosperity as well. And that can only start when they start earning a living outside of the home. I think it's critical. It doesn't mean that those women who want to stay at home should be penalized for it. They shouldn't. But I know that speaking to a lot of younger women, especially, most of them want to be earning a living. They want to find a fulfilling career. They want to find something that fills their bucket, gives them a sense of meaning and purpose. And that level of independence, let's call it, right? Because what does a job do? A job and a paycheck gives you the freedom of choice, freedom to escape a potentially bad situation at home, escape even sometimes a bad job that you already have. If you're working for a paycheck, it gives you that ability to start saving, to start investing. You cannot begin to talk about female empowerment without talking about financial empowerment. The two go hand in hand. And what happens in the Middle East absolutely has a larger impact on the rest of the globe.
Absolutely. And we've seen the World Bank and many other agencies really quantify the fact that economic prosperity for women is a lever for every other development indicator, for the health of their families, for the education of their children, for the safety and security of their children. It's a lever for all of these other important critical development factors.
Well, I'll also add one thing, Jasmine, sorry. Yeah. I feel like when women hold power, okay, when they hold power in a leadership role, financial power, they not only make things better for themselves, their children, their spouse, their households, it's a domino effect. They make things better for their communities, they make things better for their society. They're always thinking outside of their immediate realm. So it behooves everybody, right, to make sure that that's possible, that we're leaving doors open for them so that they can make that level of impact on society as a whole.
Absolutely. And we've got 3 more questions coming in. So I want to get to them super quick because we're now at 25 minutes.
Oh, geez. Okay.
One of them, we've been talking about, power and leadership. And one of the questions that has come in is, how do we balance confidence with humility? You want to seem, she says, I want to seem competent and confident in my ability to succeed, but I also don't want to come across as arrogant. How do you balance that with humility?
I talk about the fact that you have to know what your value is. Where is it that you bring something of value to the organization that you're working with, and to be able to confidently state that. We see examples of male arrogance everywhere. To be honest with you, I think we could stand to use to see a little bit of female arrogance. I might be chastised for saying that, but let's take that risk, shall we? We've seen it for millennia, okay, with men. I think we can afford to take a little bit of risk with making those statements about ourselves. I've always felt that if I put out the effort and the energy to make the organization better, then no one really criticizes me for saying I did this. Does that make sense? It's as if you can quantify the value that you're bringing to the organization, no one's going to question you on it. I do know that it's a very real problem in terms of females and women basically saying that they've accomplished something, that they're very good at something. But I think until we start to do that as women in society, that fear is always going to be there. So I would say to the person who asked the question, just start doing it. Start stating your value. Start speaking your value. Start speaking your truth. And there's always going to be somebody who's going to question you. You're never going to get 100% agreement, but you've got to start feeling that about yourself and making those statements.
And Anita, you talk about framing it in terms of your value to the organization that you work for. And that's, I think, a really positive way of doing that. Question that's come in, speaking of men, what can the men in our lives do to better advocate for us? The men in our lives, personally or professionally?
Oh, hands down, speak up. Hands down, use your voice. I will say, I don't think this whole initiative towards empowerment as a whole can work unless we have male allies. They've got to be a part of the solution. It can't just be, it's important to gather the sisterhood, so to speak, and lock arms and move forward. But it's so important. I think about it, over 28 years, there's no way I would have gotten to the place that I'm at right now without having the men along the way say, why don't you try this project? Why don't you try managing this group of people? I've had men give me opportunities when I didn't see that potential in myself. And had I not had that, I'm proud of my work ethic, so that's there. But work ethic gets you so far. You need to have people speaking about you when you're not in the room. And that's what men need to do, certainly professionally. And of course, personally, your spouse, your father, your brothers, everybody in your life, but certainly on the job, that is critical.
Absolutely. Everyone has a role to play, including men, in women's economic inclusion and inclusion in the workforce. I've experienced that in my own life, and it's very true. Another question we have coming in is, do you think that women who have left the workforce currently will find an easier pathway back into the workplace after COVID than perhaps at other massive moments of job loss like in 2008?
Today, I woke up optimistic. So I'm going to say yes. I feel like the pandemic, it's not been a good thing, and we can all agree with that. But I think one of the things that it's done, it's been such a disruptive force that I can only speak for wealth management and financial services in general, right? I feel like we're at an inflection point, and it makes it very exciting to be in this industry right now. But here's the deal. Once this vaccine kicks in, once things go somewhat reasonably back to normal, I think we're going to have a new normal. We are not going back to, when did quarantine start in the United States? March 13th. We're not going back to March 12th. We're not in our industry. So the companies and the organizations that can capitalize on this watershed moment and say, this is what we need to do to evolve, because the industry is evolving, the world is evolving. Those are the companies that are going to be able to thrive and succeed going forward. What does that mean? It means, again, some of the things that we've talked about, getting more women into leadership, bringing more women into frontline roles. It's not just about hiring women, but what are you hiring them to do, right? And are we, and we keep talking about women on this call, and that's certainly critical. But let me also step aside and say women of color, African Americans, younger folks, next gen. Diversity can come in all sorts of different aspects, right? So once the workforce in wealth management, financial services, starts to resemble the clients that we're managing money for, right? I think that's where you're going to see a shift, and that's where the industry is headed. And again, I won't say it's just my industry. I think that that's going to be the corporate world in general. We have to go to where the puck is being hit, and that's going to be the do or die situation for many companies.
One other question that's come in that's related to what you just said is, how do you think the financial services industry compares to other industries in terms of women's roles in decision-making and talent pipelines?
I think we have a lot of ground to make up. I don't tend to mince words a lot. I feel very fortunate and blessed to be in this industry. I don't see myself doing anything other than this, but I think we've not done a very good job speaking to women on two fronts, I'll say. We have not done a great job speaking to women as investors, okay? Using a lot of jargon. If a husband and wife are sitting in a room with an advisor, only speaking to the husband, these are the things that I'm trying to make an impact. And not just me, many other women who are doing the exact type of work that I'm doing with women in wealth initiatives, and making sure that we're using the right type of dialogue with women investors. So that's one front. The other front that we've not done very good at is attracting women to the industry. Historically, we've presented this industry as, hey, it's a sales job. You've got to be really good in math. It's intimidating. But as my career has spanned all of these years, what I've found is that the best advisors and investment folks are those that can express curiosity about the person sitting across the table from them, express empathy, express help, like how to help somebody in a goals-based manner, right? What is it that you want your money to do for you, and how can I help you get there? That level of nurturing, relationship building, who the heck does that better than women? And we haven't told women that. We haven't said that's what this industry is about. So I think we've got miles to go. I think we're on a path there. I'm optimistic, but I'm not saying that we're anywhere near where we should be.
The last question I want to ask you that's come in is, if there's one piece of advice that you could give women, young women in the Middle East and North Africa who are pursuing their careers, who are starting out and building their careers, what would it be?
I can only say what's worked for me. I'm going to cheat and give you two. One is use your voice. Don't ever be silent. If you're sitting at a boardroom table, or if you're sitting in a meeting, there's a reason why you're there. Don't question it. Somebody wanted you there. Use your voice. The other thing that I would say that has greatly helped me, any organization that I've been at, I always look for ways to make myself indispensable. Like what they get them to a point where they're very, very reliant on you. What are you adding to that company's bottom line? And think through it objectively. What am I adding? What is my value add? I know I've mentioned that multiple times in the past 30 minutes, but it's so critical. What are you bringing to that company that they desperately need you for? And making yourself indispensable it's worked. It's worked, because at the end of the day, regardless of your gender, color, whatnot, especially if you're working for a corporation that values the bottom line, they're there to make money, right? If you can add to that, you're adding value. There's no telling what the future can hold for you. So those are the two things I would say. more intrinsically, please use your voice. Do not ever be silent. And then secondarily, make sure that you're finding that value add. What is it? What is the unique aspect of you that you bring to the table? Because there's something about you that's different from the person sitting to the right and left of you. Figure out what that is and use it to your benefit.
Anita, your advice really resonates. It's just amazing to have this behind the scenes advice from you, one of the top women in wealth management in the US, woman of color who, again, came here at 4 years old on a plane, no English, and look what you've accomplished. You're a role model for people everywhere, women, men, including in the region where we work, the Middle East. Just thank you for being here. It's been amazing. And thank you everyone for attending. I know we have many supporters of EFE on the line. For those of you who are new, please visit our website at efe.org. We are making a concrete difference in the lives of women and men in the Middle East by helping them to skill up and get jobs, and also follow us on social media. Thank you all for joining. And Anita, thank you again. It's been great speaking to you.
It's been an honor. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.